Hey everybody, it's Savage Lands News coming in today with a lighthearted video. I just wanted to dive into some of the Brute cards and talk about the way Brute is positioned mechanically as a hero. Rhinar, particularly Leviah, is a little bit different, right? But there are a lot of different types of Brute cards out there, right? We've had a couple sets that went one direction, right? And then another, and the next set, right? Think Everfest with the dice rolling. Think WTR with kind of like intimidates and discarding, right? But I wanted to talk about what I believe are the best Brute cards from a mechanical standpoint, and then maybe we'll talk about some of my least favorite in the next video. But yeah, just a lighthearted video today. Let's dive into it and see if you guys agree with me or not. Alpha Rampage. Now, this is just such a Rhinar card. For a long time, I really wasn't that hot on this card. I think during the last ProQuest Season 2, ProQuest Season 1, like I even was taking the numbers of Alpha Rampages down in my deck. But the more I've played Brute, the more I've really kind of adapted and learned and become a better Brute player, the more that Alpha Rampage has really just kind of become an all-star in my deck. It's a 3 for 9 with Intimidate written on the card. It blocks 3, it's pitch red. So everything, when you really look at this card, it is kind of below rate, right? 3 cards for 9 damage is a lot less than what other classes can do with 3 cards, a lot of the time. But this card plays into Rhinar's hero ability so well, right? 3 for 9, intimidate 2 times, you're going to do damage, right? You're going to leak damage. Almost no class can really block 9 with 2 cards, like maybe an unmovable from Arsenal, right? But basically, when you play this card, you're saying, I'm going to do damage to you, right? No matter what you do. And then it combos into Rhinar's cards so well, right? You can set up the triple Intimidate with Barraging Beatdown red. 3, 13 damage with 3 Intimidates, right? In one of my most recent games, I played this with 4 cards in my hand. Alpha Rampage for 17. 17 damage. Killed my opponent who had 9 health and all of his equipment left. It's just amazing, right? And when you pitch stack this card, it's great. And it's got that Brute idea behind it where it's like, I'm going to take a bunch of damage and I'm going to swing back at you, and there's nothing you can do to stop me, right? There's nothing you can do to stop the damage from going through. I am committed to hurting you, right? I just think it's like the identity of Rhinar is just like so well encapsulated in this card. It's great. And then speaking of Rhinar identity kind of boiled down into a card, I am so pleased with the direction LSS has taken Rhinar cards in the last set. They are powerful cards that tie into Rhinar's identity, his hero ability, the idea of what playing a Brute is, and they're controllable. But there's hoops you have to jump through. To play Savage Beatdown, it's not an easy task, right? And when you look at the card, it's 3 for 6, block 3, another red. So not, you can't pitch this thing, right? But when you discard a 6, this thing comes in for 12. But doing that's not easy, right? You have to play a 6. You had to pitch for the 6. That 6 had to discard a 6. Then you have to have enough resources and go again to play Savage Beatdown. And you have to have a 6 in your hand, right? You are looking at an immense amount of hoops you have to jump through. But when you play this card, your opponent is looking down an avalanche of Brute damage heading their direction with multiple Intimidates. They're taking a lot of damage, and there's nothing they can really do about it. I just think it's really... I'm just so happy with the way the Brute design has been going in the last set. There's no roll a dice and see if you win here. There's no draw a bunch of cards off the top of your deck and see what happens, right? You can play this card. You can control what's happening, but there are hoops, and those hoops play into Rhinar's identity so well. And it's like a drug, man. You get this to fire, you are on cloud 9, man. Like, you just did 12, 14 damage. It's incredible. and all of that time and energy you poured into getting this thing to fire pays off, right? It's so cool. Sand Sketch Plan, man. I have a love-hate relationship with Sand Sketch Plan. To me, right now, the way Rhinar works for me is I need blues that I can just dump. And unfortunately, Sand Sketch Plan is not one of those cards. You really got to play it or pitch it when it's in your hand. And when you play it, it's going to actively disrupt what you've drawn. But man, Sand Sketch Plan has led to some of the coolest plays I have done in Flesh and Blood. It really combos with some of our other power cards. When you have 2 Recaron Blues in your hand, or you have 2 Beast Withins in your hand, or you have like a Massacre in your arsenal and you can just trigger its ability. There's so many cool things you can do with this card. But again, it's tying into Rhinar's identity, and it's making you jump through hoops, right? And those hoops really allow you to do special things. This card would be an auto-include in almost every deck if we were leaning a little bit more discard heavy right now, but I'm personally not, so I tend to stray away from it. But I do miss playing this card a lot. And then we're going to get into like a group of cards, but these are all cards that trigger off of discarding. They do something special. And I really, really, again, with this new set that came out, really enjoy the way they've started to point brute cards in general. But we have our 2 OGs, Beast Within and Massacre, right? The original Crucible of War, if you discard this, something interesting happens, right? And then we got the 2 new cards, Reincarnate, some of the sickest art on a card ever, and Skullcrack, right? Look at just read the flavor text. It's coolest flavor text on any card in Flesh and Blood, in my opinion, right? Go ahead, read it right now. But all of these cards do something when you discard them, right? Beast Within is the most dangerous, but it's also typically the most rewarding, right? And I think that's a really good balance to have. And what's really cool about it is when things go wrong with Beast Within, your turn doesn't just end. Unless you kill yourself, but your turn doesn't just end. You are taking damage. And normally when you play Beast Within, it's to do something really important. So taking damage is part of your calculated risk. You don't just end your turn, if you don't flip a 6, which is amazing. Reincarnate feeds into this kind of idea of like longer, more discard heavy decks. Skullcrack rewards you with that 1 extra resource to let you do another larger explosive play. And Massacre gives you multiple intimidates when it's discarded. I still think right now, Rhinar's a little bit far away from having enough reward for discarding. A lot of the time, our cards that discard just aren't good enough. But these cards being printed shows me that in the future, we might have enough rewards stacked inside of our deck that discarding becomes not so negative, right? And that gives me a lot of hope. But speaking of discarding cards, this is, in my opinion, the best discard card we have in the game. The best rare / common from WTR, Savage Feast. So what makes this card so incredible is, it costs 1, right? So it's really, really low. 1 for 6, really good. That's a very good rate. Typically, if you can figure out a way to get go again, you're going to be able to follow up with a claw or a club, no matter what, right? Worst case scenario. But really, what really makes this card special is that the card that you discard lets you, as long as it's a 6, lets you draw a card off the top of your deck. So you're not really losing a card with your discard, or your random discard here. Which means that at its worst, it's going to replenish that card you discarded. You're going to be able to put that in your arsenal, and you didn't really lose anything compared to, think Wreck or Romp, where you just straight lose the card. It's 3 cards for that 1 instead of 2 for 1, right? Like what most other decks get to do. I wish we had more cards like this. Not necessarily draw off discard cards, but more cards that were like very rewarding for discarding something, right? But yeah, just an all-star. This is so good that you'll see non-discard decks run it because it is on rate. Like it's there. It's good. It's great. It gives you some pretty explosive turns. It ties into Gambler's Gloves, or you know what I mean. Scavskins, right? Just a good card in general. Barraging Beatdown, man. This card is like right next to Alpha Rampage of like identity cards for Brute, Rhinar, right? It's just so good. It is a 0 for 4, 0 for 3, 0 for 2. Intimidate, amazing. Block 3. And what it really does is it ties into Rhinar's hero ability so well, right? And on paper, this is one of our best rate cards we have. 0 for 4. Boom. Right at the top. Amazing. But this card has counterplay, right? If your opponent can block 2 with 2 cards, all of Barraging Beatdown's ability is turned off immediately. So there's a lot more ebb and flow and counterplay to this card than most other decks have, right? You can keep a D-React in Arsenal just to try and shut it off. But it also lets the Rhinar player show a huge amount of skill expression, right? Pitch stacking, Barraging Beatdowns, and Alpha Rampages, so the Intimidate damage is guaranteed. It's just, this card screams Rhinar to me, right? And I love this mechanic, right? I just love intimidating. It's the reason I play Rhinar. This card is one of the reasons I love Rhinar so much. Speaking of reasons I love Rhinar, man, I love Reckless Swing. Oh my god. I have an entire binder of signed Reckless Swings from games where this was lethal, right? So good. It's blue. Incredible. Blue, block 4. Right? The only negative about this card, right, is that defensively it is below rate. Okay? You are going to discard a card from your hand and you're only going to block 4 damage. So if you would have just blocked with 2 block 3s, you would have blocked 6 instead of 4. But man, is this brutish, right? I'm going to disregard everything in my hand. I'm going to do 2 damage to you while I'm defending. No other class can do this right now. I mean, you kind of have like Runeblade with Sigil, but this is way better. It's just such a cool win con, right? Keeping track of where your Reckless Swings are in your pitch stack, monitoring how many you've drawn, always having this kind of guaranteed win con if you can play your cards right and do the damage and do all that kind of stuff is just so cool. And it's really unique. It's a unique brute ability. Nobody else does this right now. So I don't know, man, this card it makes me so happy. I love this card. All right. And I just wanted to bring attention to not all, but I think Rhinar's equipment is like some of the most balanced equipment in the game. Maybe it's too balanced, but I think it's really good. So when you look at these pieces of equipment, there are a lot of comparisons you can draw. Mandible Claw is basically the same thing as Phi's sword, right? Romping Club is the same thing as Oldhim's hammer. They're a little bit worse than our, other heroes, right? Mandible Claws requires you to discard to get go again. That's a lot worse than having to play a card to get go again. And 2 for 3 isn't amazing. But once you enable this card on your explosive turns, man, right? That's how you do those 20 damage blood rushes. Same thing with Romping Club, right? 2 for 4 is just super good. 2 for 5, once you figured out how to turn on its passive ability, really good, right? That's 1 point below a Nothos and it's cheaper. So yeah, really good. Skullhorn too, right? AB2 on a stick is amazing. And then it's kind of got that brute mentality, right? Like where I'm going for the killing blow. I'm going to crack my helmet, give up my AB. I'm going to make you discard and I'm going to kill you this turn. Can you kill me first, right? Pretty cool. This one's kind of interesting. It's a very vanilla card, right? We got this in the Rhinar versus Dory set. Yes, this card, when you defend with it, can get rid of your Bloodrush Bellows. Does that suck? Absolutely, right? But I really like the idea of this kind of unique brute card where when you block with it, something happens, right? And I don't really think there's any other card in the game that does anything like this, right? I think this is a unique, entirely unique archetype of card. But this ties in really well to those random discard cards, right? I personally hate random discard cards. I also don't really like rolling cards. Everfest was not my favorite set of all time. Sure, we got Swing Big, but but cards like this are really, really interesting, and it's a unique play space that we as brute players could play into, right? I'm only giving you this card so I can guarantee that the damage I'm about to do to you goes unstopped, right? I think that's kind of cool, right? I really do like that idea. Yeah. And then Bloodrush Bellows. So you could probably argue this card's too strong. It probably is too strong. But the thing that if you really think about what this card is, it's basically Art of War. Identical, almost identical to Art of War, only it gives us one whole extra power over Art of War, and instead of just banishing a card, we get to discard and do an Intimidate. If I could do this, he'd be LL, right? Probably. But what really makes this card more balanced and ties into the Brute identity so well is that it actually only works on Brute cards, which I think is really good game design. When LSS prints cards, they know that a generic in the future isn't just going to be able to get abused by Rhinar because we can Blood Rush a Wounded Bull for 10, right? We can't Blood Rush a Scar for 6, right? 6 go again. So I just think it's really well designed. And it still plays into that, like, I'm going to have to keep minimum 3 cards in my hand because the only way I can get this thing to fire, I'm going to take a lot of damage, and then I'm going to retaliate back with this, like, brutish strength, you know? But yeah, the only thing I think I would like on my wish list of cards in the future is, I really like the way they've been going with the last set. I like controlling my discards and my chaos of the Rhinar deck. I don't like rolling a dice to, if I get a 6, I win. If you get a 0, you lose. I lose. I don't really like random discarding, so I'm really happy with the direction they went. But if I had 2 things I would ask for, just 2, I would ask for another Brute to de-react. I would like a little bit more defensive cards in Rhinar to kind of let us do that ebb and flow of doing huge amounts of damage, but holding on, just surviving until we can do it, right? And I think we really need a chess piece really badly. Give me an endurance counter, or give me something that pays, like gives me a reward for discarding a card, right? I really like Yendurai, the Savage Lands Dragon's ability of having that endurance counter. So maybe if I do damage, I can get an endurance counter. If I discard a 6, I can get an endurance counter. Something that helps me keep my health up while I'm kind of looking for these explosive turns, and something that gives me a little bit more reward for discarding a 6, because unfortunately so many of our cards just aren't worth it, right? They're just not worth running because it takes 3 cards to fire them, and doing 6 damage for 3 cards or 7 damage for 3 cards is just bad. Well, yeah, let me know in the comments below. Do you agree with me? Do you hate what I was saying? Do you love rolling dice on every card? Do you love random discards? Let me know if you agree with me too. Have a great day.